So just take a moment to really, you know, feel the sensations of the body, you know, sitting there, the pressure of the chair, the cushion, the temperature in the room, the sounds, all the sensations that arise from our sense awarenesses, because we have working eyes and working ears. We have the touch sensors of the body. So just check in with that. And you can even scan your body, starting with your feet and just very slowly working your way up to the top of your head. Just noticing any sensations. You can label them if you like, but don't create any stories around them. Just notice. Scan your torso, your arms and your hands. Notice if the muscles on your face are tight or relaxed. If you're breathing shallow or deep. And after you've scanned your body, then just check in with your mind. Is it open, distracted? Curious? Now recall the reason you came this evening. And try to generate an intention to use your time well. And combine it with the wish that it not just benefit yourself, but that it benefits those around you, and hopefully through whatever positive energy you create, it will ripple out to benefit all sentient beings. Now, gently return your mind to the group, and we will recite the 4 measurables. Sorry if my screen, do you see everything on my screen? Sorry.
No, just the 4 measurables.
Just the 4 measurables? Okay, because it was messier than that. Okay. So it's really good to try to bring to mind what every person or every human being is dealing with around the planet as we contemplate these four immeasurable minds. You know, there are minds in its most immeasurable with these wishes. So the immeasurable mind of love, may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. The immeasurable mind of compassion, may all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. The immeasurable mind of joy, may all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. And the immeasurable mind of equanimity, may all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. So before we start with the slides, anybody have any thoughts or questions about the readings or any meditations you tried or anything? Yeah, Jack, go ahead.
In the readings, he uses the word superstition a lot.
Yeah, that's one of Lama Yeshe's favorites.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I kind of get the feeling he means something different by it, but maybe not.
Well, he's calling our delusions our superstitious thinking. You know?
Okay.
So it's just that, you know, we have all these preconceived notions, everything that's arising from ignorance in our, you know, grasping at things that causes us to not be able to see how things actually are. And so he just refers to the, you know, to that as superstitions, that we end up with just having a lot of superstitions. So it's just what word he used. Anybody, Rebecca, do you know anything more about his use of the word superstition? Is she there? She may not be there. Yeah, there she is, but she may not be there. She just may look like she's here.
Yeah. I find Venerable Tendron, I think Jack's questions are pretty interesting because it crossed my mind as well. And I realized that maybe I needed to refresh my memory on what it just literally means. And then when I Googled it and kind of looked at it in the context in which Lama Yeshe was using it, it really did make sense. And I think it was something about, you know, superstitious belief being something that you hold to be true, even though there's no proof supporting it.
Right.
And I think that's brilliant in terms of what Lama Yeshe is teaching us, is that like we know anger is not a true state of mind, it's a confused state of mind. And I think that, you know, really resonated.
Yeah, that's exactly, and our ignorance. Mm-hmm. We hold things to exist the way they appear to exist to us. And to the Buddha, that's a belief that doesn't actually have any proof. You know, but we use the proof seeing as believing. And as we know from our scientists, that may not be true at all. So, you know, and as we know from eyewitness statements, you know, that's a really questionable theory we have, that seeing is believing. That whatever we're doing, you know, if it is involving our awareness, whether it's eye awareness, ear awareness, nose awareness, body awareness, taste awareness, or mental awareness, it is all through our filters. You know, our awarenesses now are completely drenched with our ignorance and our afflictions and our delusions. So it's, you know, and that actually affects how we see things, you know? So um, often, you know, we might really believe that we are correct about something, you know, only to find out we were misperceiving something, you know. So it's just, so in those ways, is, you know, it just sounds kind of yucky to us to be called superstitious. You know, those people from those lands that aren't as advanced as we are, they're the ones who hold suspicions, like Tibetans, not us, you know. So it's a kind of, you know, it's a, you know, we're not used to seeing it in reference to our thoughts, but our superstitious beliefs. So it's interesting. It's just another layer to try to work with or think about. Thanks, Anthony. Anything else?
Hi, I have a question. So my name is Faye. I'm reading this book by Sogyal Rinpoche called The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. And then he talks about how, you know, always recognize the dreamlike qualities of life, you know, be loving and compassionate no matter what others do to you, and what they will do will not matter so much when you see it as a dream. So does it mean?
Yeah, that's just getting at ignorance. Yeah.
Oh, so does it, when you say to see as a dream, meaning like it happened, but
it doesn't exist the way it appears to us to exist.
Oh, I
You
see.
know, yes. So in other words, what things arise, what circumstances, conditions, situations arise is, you know, related to our karma and our past actions, and how we respond to it is also related to our tendencies, our habits of mind. So those, and these arise out of this misunderstanding about how things exist. So because we grasp at things as existing in a way that is not related to karma. You know, we just think things are just, you know, you're born your certain way, and yes, you might learn some things and all that stuff, but there's something that is you. We think that, you know, objects are that way, material objects. We have this idea in our head that things, that our perspective doesn't influence, you know, what we see or what we experience, you know, like it's like when we say our feelings are real, or you know, so yeah, so we want to understand that that actually what's arising in our mind is predominantly due to our habits, the way we think since beginningless time. And so through meditation, we're trying to be more attentive, more observant to what patterns of thoughts we have, what patterns of reactions we have, so that we notice what's going on in our bodies when we're in situations that later we lose our temper or we get anxious about, or we just, we want to start connecting the dots to be able to see by observing what's going on with us all day long, having certain amount of our mental attention on our physical responses to things, our mental responses to things, so that we can see how, it's that we are acting out of habit and reaction, and that perhaps some of the ways in which we're doing this are not skillful, that they actually don't help us at all.
I see.
So
it's like an illusion.
Yes. So the way we relate to things is as if it's all really clear. As if it's just, just like a movie or something, we have a part in it. as opposed to actually, we don't have a part in it and we're watching the movie, you know, and we know that when we're watching a movie, our history, our attitudes, our desires, our aversions all interact with whether or not we like the movie or not, with whether or not we can relate to a certain scene in the movie. But we forget when we're actually in our lives that that's going on too. And then when we get more familiar with karma, the law of cause and effect, you know, and the teachings of the Buddha on how everything that we experience is a result of actions we've done. So that it's, you know, it's really, you know, everything is a dependent arising and we're one of the players. You know? And for what we experience, we're sort of the only player.
Right. Okay. Thank you. That's
You're
helpful.
welcome. So I was gonna, yeah, okay. Let me find the, you wouldn't believe how ready I am before the class starts. It's really true, really, really true. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about our obstacles to concentration. So it's taught, you know, there are basically 5 groups of obstacles. Now we've talked about some of them, you know, but I want to revisit it. So excitement and regret, dullness or sleepiness, anger, attachment and doubt. So excitement and regret. So excitement is when our mind becomes distracted by memories or things from the past that are pleasant, that we like. So we're, you know, we want to relive them. So we're, you know, daydreaming about them, about experiences of the past. And so that distracts us, pulls us away from the object of our meditation. And that is called excitement. So it's when we're distracted by something that we're attracted to, that we find pleasant, that we enjoyed. Regret is when our mind becomes distracted by unpleasant memories of the past. And so some of those may involve our regrets about our own actions, and that this can cause, you know, like when you meditate, you know, you discover that not everything we meditate on is an pleasant experience, you know, so you know, it may bring up things that, you know, harm we may have done to others, words we've said without thought, you know, careless speech, harmful speech, you know, those kinds of things. And so when they arise, when we're meditating, it can cause some agitation in the mind, or it can drive us into guilt, which is not, you know, as I've said in other classes, you know, guilt's not a healthy regret where you know, you recognize you've done something that you don't want to do again, and then you work towards not doing it again. Guilt is where you think that the action is who you are, you know. So if you do something insensitive, you just think you're an insensitive person. It's not that the action was insensitive, it's that you, at your nature, are insensitive. So this is one of those aspects that gets to this idea of grasping. This is one of our things that we do. We're in the habit of grasping at a self. And what that includes is our sense of identity. We create a story around ourselves that's constantly changing, but we create this story around ourselves. And when we hook on to some things that we don't like that we do, we say that we're, you know, bad. We don't talk, we drop the bit about the actions and we just start talking about, you know, me, Tendron is bad. And this is part of the, this attachment to our view of self. And in this case, it happens to be aversion to our view of self, but it's all one continuum. You know, but it's this holding on to that we exist a certain way, and it's our nature. And the Buddha said, we don't exist that way. We are not an action or a thought. So dullness or sleepiness. So dullness is different from sleepiness. I think we've talked about this a little bit. So this is when your mind is really kind of dull, flat, you know, where you're just not engaged at all. You're not really sleepy, but you're also not, you're not able to hold the object in a clear, alert way. So one of the things that is recommended that you actually try to bring light to your mind so you could clear away that dull state. And so this is why they, you know, recommend things like visualizations of white light and of virtuous objects like Buddhas, and or even just opening your eyes more just so you see more light. All of that can help uplift the mind. And then sleepiness we talked about before. You know, you can change your posture when you're meditating, like by sitting up straight. If you need to, you know, you can splash cold water on your face. You make sure your room is not too warm and not too dark. You don't meditate right after eating, and you don't stay up too late so you can get up early to do your meditation. And we all know how sleepiness gets in the way of, you know, just about anything we're trying to do. Anger is another obstacle. So, you know, say we're caught in that memory of something unpleasant, and instead of being our actions that we're thinking about someone else's, and we're angry about it. And then we just think about it. We follow that story. We rehearse our anger. Of course, that's going to distract us from our meditation. But we can also become angry while we're sitting. You know, we get angry at the cat. We get angry at anything making noise. We get angry at our bodies for not being comfortable, or the fact that there is no such thing as a comfortable meditation cushion, meditation bench, meditation chair, you know. Or we become angry at ourselves because we think we're not doing it right. So this can all distract us or become an obstacle.
Venerable Tendron, would like negative energy kind of be in that category as well? Because I notice sometimes, it's usually when there's something else going on, then when I'm trying to sit, that there's definitely this aversion to either wanting, impatience maybe is a better word, or negative energy. I guess those.
It's anything that's not the object.
Right.
So, I mean, that's the shorthand version, you know, so yeah. So with, you know, so all of these things are distractions. So anger is a distraction because it's a forceful state, first of all. And so it pulls you away from what you're supposed to be doing. Attachment's the same thing, only it's towards something that we like, you know. Then, and the last one is doubt. You know, we start doubting, what's the point of this? You know, oh, I'm not capable of it. What do you mean there's something wrong with getting angry when someone's harmed you? That can't possibly be true, you know, blah, 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 blah. You know, and then we talk ourselves out of the point of, you know, why meditate? So if we go back to, so excitement, what's interesting about excitement, if we're pulled away to something pleasant, you know, we may not be making it up in the sense of we are having a memory, you know, but it's, you know, but it's drawing us away from the object of meditation. You know, so so this is when we need to understand a couple of things. One is that the purpose of meditation isn't just to feel better. So spending your time thinking about pleasant memories, which we might enjoy, is, you know, I'm neutral about that, you know, although it can certainly increase attachment, but it's certainly not the topic of meditation. So you want to recognize that, oh, this is not helping me meditate. I am just, you know, I'm not disciplining my mind or becoming familiar with my object of meditation. I'm allowing myself to just think about things. So even in positive energy in the room could do it. You know, that you're just like, it's really hard to be a good, strong practitioner when you've just fallen in love. You know, because the only object of your thought is that exaggerated object of your affection. You know, and so you just much rather think about them. When you're thinking about that, you know, when you're rehearsing all bad, you know, bad memories, same kind of thing. We just need to recognize that's not why I'm sitting down. Meditation's also not supposed to make you feel worse. So we need to be, you know, skilled at recognizing, oh, I've gotten hooked by this, you know, and yes, I might feel like, oh, but you know, I really did mess up, so it's good for me. But not if it's not the object of your meditation. You know, so one of the things they mentioned about excitement is that if you're sitting down to meditate on Medicine Buddha and green Tara keeps appearing to you, the solution isn't to start meditating on green Tara, because now you've just given your mind permission to not do what it's been told. And so you're practicing what you're already good at. Does that make sense? So remember, these are obstacles to being able to hold our concentration. So dullness, if we're not able to reflect on our object of meditation with a certain alertness, curiosity and interest, you know, then we're not going to be able to, you know, we're not going to learn anything. It's not going to be transformative in any way. It's just going to be sort of a stagnant 5 minutes. So we want to do what we can to help ourselves be uplifted. If we're excited and also distracted, we want to help ourselves be subdued. So we might meditate on death and impermanence. Because we have to just remember the point. While we're meditating, we're trying to discipline our mind to stay on the object that we're reflecting upon, whether it's a single pointed or if it's an analytical meditation. We won't want to be pulled away from the object. So anger, first of all, we all know that anger, well, we don't all know, we're all trying to understand that anger might be, the Buddha taught us, starting over, the Buddha taught us that anger is an incorrect state of mind that is exaggerating the negative aspects of its object. It may even be completely making them up because it could be just totally wrong. But if, you know, whatever the source of our anger is, whether it's an object, you know, a material thing, a physical thing, or a person, or an animal, whatever, you know, we are unable to see anything good about the object of our anger in that moment. So whether it's someone else or ourselves or my computer. So, and it's a disturbing state of mind. That's why it's considered one of the disturbing emotions, is that it's an affliction, because when it arises in the mind becomes unpeaceful. So So you can't meditate in a state of anger. You can meditate about anger. But if you're meditating on anger, you're just becoming more familiar with anger. So you can say you're meditating on it, but it's not what the Buddha was advising us to do. Same thing with attachment. We don't want to spend our time when we're supposed to be meditating on an object, even if the object is attachment, and get hooked by thinking about cheesecake. And oh, I hope they have some at the lunch counter. Not that any of us are thinking about it these days. So one of the strategies for attachment, and anger for that matter, are remembering impermanence. Whatever's hooked us, we are exaggerating its qualities or its defects if it's anger. And that everything changes. There's no point in being attached because it will not stay the same. So clinging or grasping to have more, all of those things are sort of, a waste of energy. But in meditation particularly, it's not the point. We don't need to become more familiar with objects of attachment because that's why we're attached. We are already very familiar. Any questions?
Venerable Tendron, excitement is also when thinking about things in the future, yes or no?
It can be. But when it's about the future, it's made up. It's totally fiction. Does that make sense?
Yes, I guess I was thinking almost like worrying or ruminating on a to-do list, that type of thing.
Yeah, and so that's sort of like, worrying is under the category of anger, because we have aversion to it, of course. We're worried about something, and it's our attachment. Like if we're worried about our health, that's attachment to ourself that gives a rise to this worry. Now, worrying is not problem solving. So worrying is just becoming more familiar with all the reasons why, you need to protect yourself, or you need to protect your child, or you need to, protect your job, or you need whatever it is you're worried about. So it reflects, some attachment to something because you're worried about losing it, or it can reflect aversion if you're worried about having to stay with that job because you can't find another one. But worrying is not problem solving. So it is just meditating on something that's causing you suffering. Because worrying is a suffering state of mind. So you're choosing to practice a suffering state of mind. I mean, not choosing in the sense that we normally think of choice, but instead of trying to break the habit of worrying, if we keep becoming more familiar with worrying, that habit energy of worrying just becomes stronger. So if you're trying to meditate to learn how to get your, you choose what habits of mind you want to follow and which ones you don't, which positive habits you have that you want to strengthen, and which negative ones you don't want to strengthen. You know, meditation is a tool to help us with that. So if we're getting distracted while we're concentrating, then we're defeating our purpose. You know, it's not helpful. Anthony, did you have a question?
Yes, Venerable Tendron. So I guess if you're really hooked by one of these states of minds, I mean, I suppose, is it appropriate, can you still sit with it and do maybe single pointed meditation and try to focus on your breath? Is this particularly
What is
true
it that
for
you
anger?
want to focus on though?
Yeah, maybe the breath, because you're so consumed by whatever the state of mind you have is. Like I don't know if anger is unique in that it's, because if you're worrying, maybe you can work with that more easily and then get to your main meditation after a few minutes, but anger, that might not dissipate even after.
So you'll have to be very careful, you know, so you want to see if by focusing on it, you're feeding it.
Mm-hmm.
Because partly it's a suffering state of mind, so it certainly can increase aversion. So one thing though you can do is sit with the experience, become familiar with the suffering that it is. You know, not try to use your reasoning, because when you're angry, that state of mind is kind of cut off.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you may use your reasoning, but it's not likely to be correct.
Okay. And with the other types of obstacles, can you use your reasoning? Like with worry, for example?
Well, it depends on how forceful the aversion or attachment is. So like if you're really worried and if that's a really strong state of mind that's going on, you may have to wait. You know, one of the things that you observe the sensation, what does it feel like to be angry? What does it feel like to worry? What does it, am I getting anywhere with my doubt? Am I, is it constructive doubt, or is it just, spinning myself into, I can't decide kind of mind. And then, that's it. You can't reflect on that, but you can reflect on how agitating those states of mind are, even the ones we like, So, one thing you can, so you can meditate, you can just experience it. You can experience the feeling of anger or anxiety or greed or jealousy or whatever it is. And then you can also hopefully observe its impermanence. So it may be that you haven't dropped your anger at your aversion towards the object of your anger, but you don't hold that mind of anger 24/7. Once you've gotten angry, doesn't mean you just stay that way until some resolution. We're not like that. We get distracted from it, which is, kind of a good news thing. So, yeah, so we just have to, so yes, you certainly can just sit there, but don't just sit there and be miserable. Sit there and observe what it, really become aware of the sensations. Maybe notice what it does in the body. Does your body heat up? Does your, just notice all, what you can notice, and notice when it ends, and don't feed it. But if you start feeding it, you may have to, move on. Just go for a run.
So the technique.
You don't want to practice rehearsing your anger.
Yeah. So the technique you can use really depends on the strength of the state of mind. Because if you're angry about something that happened on the road, maybe that'll pass. But if you're angry about something that happened in the past, it still affects you. It might be time to go run.
Yeah, or it's time to, if you caught it before you're feeling that anger, that's when you can apply your reasoning and start looking at, am I looking at this object correctly? Is there anything that I did? Really, okay, so it's not fair. What does that say about karma? So we can bring in all the different things we understand. So, All right. Anyone else? All right.
Sure, I have a question about Vajrasattva practice. So when you're trying to do the remedy and the mantras and the clear light, and so I guess before that, when you're thinking about regret and you're really reflecting on regret, that's the time where you're thinking about the regretful actions. And then when you go to the remedy,
Let me just answer that piece right there. So when you're having virtuous regret, not guilt, okay? When you have the mind that just says, ooh, I did this, and I'm really sorry I did this. I can see how wrong it is to have done this. I want to not do this again. That is fine to meditate on. We want to become familiar with virtuous regret. We want to become familiar with this, oh, I really never want to do this again. I see the harm it's caused. I've experienced when it's, that harm, when it's been done towards me, you really want to use that as the material to, transform your mind so that you can strengthen your resolve not to do it again. So that, so regret's different than guilt. So yes, you can think about virtuous regret. Part two of your question.
then part two, then when you move into the remedy and you're doing the mantra, okay, so saying the mantra, okay, another question is, sometimes I notice that, I like to say it just lightly, but then sometimes I find myself getting a little lazy and just wanting to say it in my head. Is there a...
Oh, my. Yes, don't do that.
Okay. So always...
It's a recitation. If you don't say it out loud, you're not reciting. You don't purify your speech. And so especially if it's about an action of speech, you really want to say it out loud. That doesn't mean you have to yell it. The only time they ever say it's okay not to say it out loud, with various practices, there are all sorts of things that I have to do that involve recitation, is if there's someone who will hear it that shouldn't be hearing it.
Okay.
Like when I have to recite my vows during the confession ceremony, if I'm living with a family or something, I would not say it out loud because vows are not to be heard by those who don't hold them.
Okay. All
Okay.
right.
But if you have a commitment to recite, it's, this does not mean if you're in a meeting, and you just, really thought something horrendous about somebody at the meeting or actually said something out loud that you regret, that you can't, because I often do a Om Vajrasattva Hum, Om Vajrasattva Hum, Om Vajrasattva Hum in my head to help me remember to purify it later. And they say that the more immediate our regret is, the lighter the mistake is in terms of karmic consequences. So if this is over, for some of you, this is totally over your head because you haven't studied karma yet. So I'm just allowing these people with more complicated questions to ask. So you'll just have to be patient with us. And I'm going to talk about that in just the purification practice as well.
Okay.
So yes. You've muted yourself. What's the other part?
Was that, so then do you focus on the light or the recitation or both?
Well, there's a visualization. If you're using the visualization, you're focused on the visualization and you're imagining, you're really trying to think, I am purifying this. So the seed that I have placed on my mental continuum and all the ones that are similar, you always add that in. I regret this action and all the ones I've ever done that are similar to this action, you know, you really are trying to feel the light is purifying you, or whatever visualization you're using. And after you complete, you know, the ones of body or something, you really try to feel really like, okay, good. This is one of the ways Tibetans are able to just move on. You know, they don't turn most of the mistakes they make into guilt. They just, oh, you know, okay, well, I cleaned that up. Doesn't mean they'll never do it again. That's why our resolve has to be very realistic. Very, you know, we don't say, I'm not gonna do this again ever. You know, that's not probably true. There might be some things you'll say, I'll never do that again in this life, you know, but most things are, I'll never do it again, but you know, I'll try not to do this again for the next 8 hours or 2 seconds, whatever it is, you know, so. Okay. So one of the, I'll talk about this some more. So impermanence, just remembering that things end, can help us with attachment and aversion. So if we don't like a certain situation or whatever, remembering impermanence can help us with that. Also, with anger and attachment, we can think about equanimity. So we'll do a meditation on that tonight. On, you know, this idea that our attitude of friends, enemies, and strangers, how fluid and impermanent they are. Regret. Okay, so would you like to learn more about how to handle regret? Or shall we look at equanimity? Let's take a vote. Who wants to hear more about what to do with regret?
Yes, regret.
That's only 3. Okay, a 4, 5.
Regret.
Okay.
Regret.
We have some forceful regret. Okay. And it's actually, this is a good time to talk about regret, just in the sense of the coronavirus. You know, if you've looked at any of or listened to any of Rinpoche's teachings for the past month from Kopan, you know, he talks a lot about how, you know, this global pandemic is, you know, we created the cause for it, all of us. All of those who are vulnerable to it, you know, this is what cause and effect means of karma. It's not like we do anything in this life, you know, it just means in our past lives, we've done something to harm others that is causing us to be vulnerable to illness. You know, it's like, since we're not Buddhas, it's not like, even though we have this great human rebirth, we are still vulnerable to illness and death, you know, and just pain. You know, we can break our arm, we can, you know, they're just countless ways we can hurt our body. So all of these are the result, is the fact that our body is vulnerable to harm is a consequence of us harming others. You know, the good news is we also have bodies that are made for hugs, that are made for touch. We don't have claws like so many animals have, you know, so we've also created the cause to have affection, you know. So it's you know, it's not all bad news. Plus, the human body has this terrific physical support for the mind. Our brain's very sophisticated, very capable. So, but when bad things happen to us, when we experience suffering, the Buddha said that suffering experience is an effect. It is the result of some harm we have done in the past. Unfortunately, not necessarily of this life. In fact, most likely not of this life. So we can't learn the lesson easily because karma, there's no such thing as instant karma. No. So it's, we have to, really think a long time about this. And then we need some realizations to have confidence in it. So regret. So I'm looking for my slides on regret. Okay. So one of the meditations we do is to try to purify our past actions. The way cause and effect is taught that with our actions of body, speech, and mind, every single moment of our actions of body, speech, and mind, place a seed, not literally a seed, but a seed on our mind stream as an analogy. And that seed is neutral, but at some point, it's going to meet the conditions, just like an ordinary seed would, of water and sunlight and soil and nutrients for it to grow. Our seeds on our mental continuum will eventually meet a condition that's perfect for it to ripen. And when it ripens, if it's a seed that was placed by a negative action, it ripens as something unpleasant. If it's a seed placed by a positive action, it ripens as something pleasant. No, unpleasant, but I don't remember what I said. So the good actions ripen as pleasant, the negative actions ripen as unpleasant, and neutral actions have neutral effects, like brushing your teeth or something. I have got to figure out how to make more of y'all show up on my screen so I can see your faces. Yeah.
Icon. That's how you can click on the grid.
They are in the grid, but with it's just not doing it. So anyway, okay, so the Buddha taught, okay, any questions about that? I mean, I know karma will go into it a great deal more, but in future classes. But so far, so good, sort of, or at least it's on the shelf, whatever. Remember that, that's what I was taught. Anything that I just kind of went, I don't know about this. I was just taught you just put it on the shelf and check it out every now and then and see if you have more understanding. So the Buddha taught that every single negative action that we've ever done can be purified. And what that means is it will become incapable of producing its suffering effect. And the way you do this is by applying 4 opponent powers. This is just from an introduction. If you don't have compassion, all you have is a self-centered mind. So the good news is we all have some level of compassion. It's proof of our Buddha potential. So when we're meditating on an action that we regret, we want to, when we set a motivation, we might think something like, I do not want to experience suffering, whether it's physical pain or mental unhappiness. I am just like every other living being in this regard. No one, not even the smallest animal, wants to suffer. To whatever extent I can develop the good qualities of my mind and turn away from negative mental states, to that extent I can benefit others by my example and by my actions. So I do this practice not just for myself, but for all living beings, those close to me, those who are strangers, and even those I find disagreeable or harmful. So we really want to try to cultivate this kind of attitude of understanding that this is a method to reduce our suffering in the future. So it's not a small thing, it's a really strong practice. And of course, if it will benefit others if we stop, if it helps us reduce our negative actions. And so when we say actions, they can also be actions of speech and of body. But the mind drives them all, so it's a very important component. So regret. His Holiness was asked one time what the difference was between guilt and regret. And he said, guilt is looking into the past and saying, I did this and this and this and this, and I am a bad person. So regret is simply recognizing that, yes, indeed, I did this and this and this. And then you think, and what can I do about it? So it's a very different attitude. It's an active, it says there's something, it's implying that there is something I can do about it. I want to know what I can do about it. It is not thinking you're stuck. You can move on. So regret is taking responsibility for having said or done or thought, these actions that are unskillful. So this is a recommended daily practice. And so what you would do is at the end of the day, you kind of look back on your day and try to recall any things that you did, whether it was rolling your eyes at the boss, or your partner, whether it was actually saying something, gossiping about someone behind their back, or, yelling at someone, or having spent money you didn't have, whatever it is. You just look back at your day and you recognize these actions as habits you have, but that they aren't who you are. They are not your nature. Your nature is Buddha potential. But it is a habit. And anything that we do again and again gets stronger. It places more and more. Those seeds in the mind get bigger and bigger, or there are just so many of them, it makes deeper imprints. And these will ripen as suffering. But you really want to look back and think about, and so if there's something you've done that harms you, you want to also regret that. So it's, we know there's a consequence to eating bad food. We know there's a consequence to smoking cigarettes. We might not know whether or not there's a consequence of lying or stealing and killing. Because it's not instant karma. We might think that if no one sees us doing it, it's it's okay. But the Buddha said nobody's out there judging us. Karma is not some superior being going, a judge, like a judge. It's not Judge Judy sitting there going, okay, you're having this punishment. It just is how things unfold. It's cause and effect. It's no different than planting a seed and giving it all it needs, and then it still doesn't grow because the seed itself was faulty. Or, you plant a seed and it's a healthy seed and you give it all the right stuff and it grows. Karma is just cause and effect. If all the conditions that are necessary for something to happen, it happens. And one of the things, instead of what we know about the physical universe, the Buddha said our mind is a cause. So our consciousness, and that includes eye awareness, nose awareness, ear awareness, all the sense awarenesses, plus the mental awareness, which is the most important one, you know, will bring effects. So then you make, you regret them, whatever you remember going through the day. And then you can just, our teachers just recommend that we make it as expansive as possible. So whatever negative actions you've done today, you think, oh, and whatever, you know, I caused others to do like this, you know, like if you yell at someone and then they turn around and yell at someone else, or rejoiced when others did, like say your boss yells at a coworker you don't like. You regret those negativities that you can remember, and you regret all the ones you can't remember, and this in previous lives. So you set a strong motivation. I regret these negative actions and seek to purify them completely. I do not wish to suffer. I want to purify these negativities completely before they have the chance to cause suffering for me. So what that's getting at is if a seed has not ripened yet, you can render it unable to produce a result. But if it is already ripened, we can't do anything about it. Then reliance. So this power is the power of relying on the teachings. You're relying on the instructions of the Buddha of what to do. You know, you can also look at it as going for refuge to the teachings of the Buddha, the Dharma. You know, so it's just like if you go to the doctor for an illness and you rely on their expertise, so you take their medicine, you do what they tell you to do so that you can cure your illness. You know, if we don't rely on the teaching, so we don't actually really do the practice, or like Nicole was saying, sometimes we get lazy, you know, this medicine won't have an effect. So the reason you want to rely upon the Buddha and practice what he's saying is because you've looked into the mind, you've heard about his teachings on karma, and it makes some kind of sense. And you know you don't want suffering, so you know that you need his methods. The Buddha can't purify our seeds. He can't take them away. If he could, it would have been done. So we just need to follow his advice. That's all we can do. We need to check it out. You know? The second part of reliance is we're relying on sentient beings. Because those are we harm sentient beings. So, but we generate compassion because there are suffering sentient beings. And compassion is a great quality. We want to cultivate it. We want to perfect it. And if we didn't have suffering sentient beings, we wouldn't do it. We wouldn't think about compassion. So we are, you know, they say that, you know, the Dharma is, you know, the actual refuge. But the way we can internalize the Dharma is through, you know, our compassion and loving kindness for other sentient beings and for developing patience. All of our good qualities depend on sentient beings. Our generosity depends on someone needing something. Our patience depends on someone, on some, you know, of us perceiving harm from someone else. You know, this is how we develop these things. So you can think, you know, so we might think, my mind is a dependent arising. It arises from causes and conditions. For this reason, it can change. It's up to me whether it changes in a positive or negative direction. The most subtle level of my mind is my Buddha potential. This is the potential I have to completely transform my mind so that all my good qualities are perfected and nothing negative remains, not even the slightest bit. I can rely on or take refuge in this future state of my own perfection. So this is another reliance we have. And that's our future Buddhahood. Obviously, some of these things take a lot of time to have any confidence in, you know. So you start where you are. But that's one of the reasons why Dharma is the actual refuge, because, you know, it's our internalization of the Dharma that's the actual refuge. It's our future Buddhahood. I can only develop my mind to its utmost extent by relying on other living beings. They are the basis for developing loving kindness, compassion, patience, all the qualities I value and admire. So then there's a remedy, and this is a practice that you do. So Vajrasattva is a 100-syllable mantra that is recited a certain number of times with a visualization that is often used at the end of the day to purify whatever was done during the day. It's particularly useful for those things we can't remember. So we don't have any person to apologize to. There's no, you know, we just, you know, we can't actually make amends. All we can do is try to not do it again. So, but we can also apologize, say prayers for people's well-being. We can donate time to others. Anything positive that we do with the intention of purifying the negativity can become the remedy. So the practices of like prostrations to the 35 Buddhas or reciting the names of the 35 Buddhas, you know, because those are virtuous objects, then you're relying also on the power of the holy objects. But you don't have to wait till you have some confidence in those kinds of practices. It's really about this, you know, doing something that helps you, you know, sort of seal the deal, you know, like I really don't want to do this again. So I'm going to work in the, you know, I'm tired of being miserly. I'm tired of being chintzy with my time for others. So I'm going to spend this much time, quality time, you know, blah, 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 as a remedy to my habit of putting myself first. So, according to the Buddha, sickness is the fruit of having harmed others in the past. It is the experience similar to the cause of having killed in the past. So by applying the 4 opponent powers and performing a practice, plus going and helping others, helping sick people can be a powerful, direct antidote to that type of action. You make the effort to go and save the lives of a few animals. You go buy some worms. This is why we do animal liberation with worms. You know, so we rescue them from the bait shop and release them in the forest. So saving lives is one of the ways. It's a direct in opposition to harming someone's body. Then the resolve. This is a key piece. This is where we make the decision to change. Without making the determination to change, we just keep doing the same old thing. And we want to make our resolve specific. We want to make our promise, you know, realistic. So we might be able to say, I will not kill for 24 hours. I will not get angry for 2 hours. Or if you're going straight to bed, I will not get angry for 8 hours. So whatever you can do to make it as, you know, you want it to be sincere. And the more sincere your mind is, the more powerful the practice is. Because the practice is only as good as our mind. You know, if we just go through it, you know, just read the words, say the things, you know, da, 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 but don't really think about, boy, I hope I don't do this again. I really don't like the effect it has, da, 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 da. It won't purify anything. As Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, we can mold our minds into any shape we like, because that's what we've already done. When we start to observe our mind, we discover our patterns of habits. If we stop feeding the habits that just result in suffering, they will weaken. And then I always like to add rejoicing at the end, because rejoicing in our positive actions actually gives us even more merit, so yay. And also it helps us want to do it again. And we want to notice our progress. So you can rejoice at the end of the day of anything that you did that day that was kind or generous or helpful, or it was, like you taught something, or anything that you did as in the effort to increase your good qualities and to decrease your unskillful habits. Anything and then you make it really big, and not just this life or not just today, but all the ones you've done in the past, and think how wonderful it is. You can even rejoice in all the actions of positive actions you see someone else do, or that they are doing. It's not a bad idea to rejoice in His Holiness's positive actions and positive thoughts, or Rinpoche's positive thoughts every day. Lama Yeshe called that the lazy way to accumulate merit. And then you always dedicate at the end. You want to dedicate the benefits, to the great enlightenment, basically, until there are no suffering beings at all. How are we doing?
Terrific.
Question? Okay. Nicole?
I was going to say, yeah. So, for example, can we turn or try to turn like a whole day into a purification practice?
Yep. Yeah. So you can, like in Thich Nhat Hanh's tradition, they had mindfulness days, so it's really nice. You can have a mindfulness morning where you really try to be mindful about everything that you do. You pause before you say anything. You really think about how you're going to say it. You might do lots of practices, or meditations in the morning. You meditate on compassion and loving kindness and equanimity, So and you can use you can use the 4 measurables as a remedy, do a meditation on the 4 measurables. But there's just, so it's what you don't want to do is not set your resolve and dedicate. Like you can set up the whole thing, and that your remedy is how you're going to be that day. But you don't set yourself up to fail. You don't say something like, I'm not going to lose my temper today. That's too big of a test. It means like you're testing yourself, and this is not a test. This is not a dress rehearsal. This is our lives, and we're creating causes and effects. We don't want to lie. So we just say, I'm going to do my best to guard my speech. I'm going to really try not to speak without thinking before I say anything.
Okay, and then if you were to do the 35 confession Buddhas, same thing. You're doing that practice, and you start from the beginning.
It sounds like you have a lot of questions about such a day. Can you just send me an email about them? I can help you structure a day like that.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's fun to do those kind of days. It feels good. Yes, Jack?
Yeah. So it seems like the purification meditation that was in the reading seems like it's the opposite of the Tonglen meditation, but maybe not. Maybe I'm misunderstanding it.
Let me look at it.
Well, what you're basically doing
what
is
aspect of it?
You're imagining all your negativities in the purification meditation going out and all the good stuff coming in, which seems like it's the opposite.
You're practicing Tonglen for yourself.
Okay.
But it is. Purification's not Tonglen.
Well, it seems like the opposite is what I was getting at.
No, it's just that we are entitled to take care of our own stuff, if we don't take care of our minds, we'll never be able to help others. You know, so purification practice is about cleaning up our actions of body, speech, and mind. And so one simple way to start is like a purification meditation. And this is one of those that uplifts you, especially if you're prone to guilt, you know, is just to visualize that with every exhale, you're breathing out all your unskillful habits, you know, and with every inhale, you're breathing in all the good qualities of enlightened beings. You know, now when you breathe out the negativities, you don't imagine that they're floating out there. They disappear. You know, it's like a virus. It doesn't last long in air. You know?
Yeah, I don't know. When you were going over regret just a few minutes ago, stuff from decades ago, horrible things I did kept popping up into my head.
Right.
That normally doesn't happen. But
Well, that's why you want in this. So that's a great opportunity tonight to do a purification practice before going to sleep. You know, is to, oh yes, I remember those. It's because, you know, it's a good thing. You know, and we don't want to forget. We just don't want to think that's who we are. You know, there's a difference. You know, we want to remember the harm we've done because so that we won't do it again. We don't want to purify and then think, no big deal. We purify because it was a big deal. Does that make sense? Okay, enough talk. Jabber, 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 jabber. Okay, so. So I'm going to do an equanimity meditation, you know, like in the four measurables, you know, may all sentient beings abide in equanimity, you know, free from attachment for friends and hatred for others. Okay, does that sound okay? All right, so let's take a few moments to settle our mind from what we've just been doing. And a way to do that is, again, you know, first of all, you want to sit up straight, trying to get in an alert, you know, open posture, you know, that, you know, like, oh, I'm not really about to fall asleep, but we can pretend anyway. So lower your eyelids, but don't shut your eyes. Keep them gently open so that there's some light coming in. Take a few deep breaths. And then just check in with your body. Just really be aware of your body sitting here. And then find the sensation of your breath going in and out of the body, either at the tip of your nose or your belly rising and falling. And whatever thoughts arise, whatever sensations arise, it's no problem. Just try not to follow them. And if you do follow them and you realize it, just come back to that sensation of the breath. and set a motivation. Something like, I'm doing this meditation to investigate the Buddha's teachings that the mind of equanimity is skillful. I'm doing this to not just benefit my own mind, but to benefit those around me. Since beginningless time, we have been discriminating between people that help us, people that hurt us, and those that we do not know, because we see ourselves as different from others. This discrimination arises from wanting our own happiness first. Anger arises from greed and a sense of self-importance. And whoever disturbs our happiness is a problem, and we do not like them. Whoever helps our happiness feeds our attachment and becomes a friend. Those who do neither are strangers. These are all labeled by ignorance, seeing things incorrectly. By creating strangers, friends, and people we do not like, we create problems and suffering for ourselves and others. Anger and attachment easily arise and give no peace in the mind. Attachment causes war, it damages the environment. The whole planet is in danger because of attachment to resources, wealth, and power. Due to anger and attachment, we endlessly circle in samsara and leave more and more negative imprints on the mind. This causes endless experiences of suffering again and again for eons. And if we continue to behave like this, there will never be any liberation or enlightenment. Everyone we know starts as a stranger and then becomes a friend or person we dislike. And then friends can become unfriendly in one day and then become strangers again over time. So friend, stranger have been wrongly labeled for very short-term reasons. In this life, we have experienced many examples of these so-called friends, enemies, and strangers, and they always change. If we are wise, we understand the constantly changing nature of relationships. Nothing is certain. So there is no reason to be attached to friends and feel negative to people who annoy us. If the belief in a permanent self was correct, then friends, strangers, and enemies would always remain the same. They would never change, and everyone would see everyone else in exactly the same way. But this does not fit with reality. Problems do not come from others, but from our minds. Negativities we have created in the past cause the problems we experience now. Retaliation for harm only brings more suffering. The person we dislike is our object of the practice of patience, which helps us overcome our anger. So we could be overjoyed to see this person who helps us practice peace in our minds. Practicing patience is a source of present and future happiness. Without people we do not like, there's no chance to practice patience. So they are actually a cause for our liberation and enlightenment. The person who hurts me mentally or physically is under the control of their disturbing emotions. They are being used by these afflictions like a stick is used to hit someone. It is not the person's fault that they are hurting us, as they are being used. Just as the pain felt from being hit by the stick is not the fault of the stick. The person is not their afflictions. If we had clear wisdom, we could see harming others only harms ourselves, even when in retaliation for others' harm. The Buddhas have compassion for all beings and consider all beings to be more important than themselves. So harming another being for our happiness is the action of a mind that is not thinking correctly. The Buddha said that anyone who harms another is not a disciple of the Buddha. Not harming the worst enemy, the ignorance in our very own mind, and instead harming an external enemy is like killing a friend by mistaking them for the enemy. We need to oppose the inner enemies that cause all our suffering, the afflictions. When we have realizations of this, we would never harm another person. The people we dislike are merely concepts created by our dislike and anger, just as friends are a concept based on our attachment and ignorance. We should not believe the wrong concepts of our ignorant mind. Wisdom tells us that our friends and strangers and people we do not like are only names, merely labeled by what they do or not do for us, merely labeled by our self-cherishing. In this way, we have been cheating ourselves since beginningless time. May this meditation help us reflect on our labeling, how labeling is not a fact, they're just convenient categories. And when we're speaking of friends, enemies, and strangers, they're only temporary and in relationship to us. Our friends are someone else's enemies, our strangers are someone else's friends. No more than that. They're just names that we give people who help us or hurt us, or that we don't know in any particular moment. So may reflecting in this way help us reduce our habit of discrimination, and not only benefit our own peace of mind, but ripple out to benefit others. When you're ready, just gently return to the group. So this is an example of sort of the kind of meditation we can create for ourselves. You know, we study something, we think about these, you know, this idea that names like friends and strangers and enemies are just convenient terms we use, but they really just describe a relationship with someone from our perspective. It may match the other person's perspective. Some, you know, our friends may see us as friends too. Our enemies may not see us as enemies. You know, so, and of course, all our friends and enemies were strangers once, and many of our friends and enemies are strangers now. You know, everything changes. So, but we would, you know, read about this idea, really trying to develop this idea that we're, you know, we're really the same. And if we take self-interest out of the picture, if we don't make it about us, then labels like friend, enemy, or stranger are meaningless. They're just, you know, because all they really describe is how we feel about them, you know. So making that the condition for whether we wish to help them or not help them, you know, is part of our why we suffer. You know, it's so, you know, that's why it's helpful after you've had some practice to write your own meditations, you know, or you don't actually have to write them, but, you know, when, say, you're thinking about material you become very familiar with by reading it again and again and again, having questions about it, thinking about it, all that stuff. And then you develop your reasoning if you find some truth to it, and then you reflect on that. So you just keep going deeper and deeper. And then while you're reflecting on it, if there's some experience you have during the meditation that kind of shifts your understanding in some way, you don't keep going. You just stay there and experience that shift. And this helps make it more firm. It makes it deeper into the mind stream. Does that make sense? Yes, Brian.
I have a question about when you refer to the stick.
Yes.
What could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes. So the idea here is the Buddha said that until we meet teachings like this, or some, you know, others similar to this, we're just out of control with our habits of mind. And those habits of mind are pushing us in our habitual ways. So if you're prone, to, if you have a habit of impatience, then you act from that impatience whenever you meet conditions that you don't like, that don't serve you in whatever way you think they should, and then so you're out of control. So when other people are treating us in a way that we don't like, we can think of them as like the stick. It's their afflictions. It's their states of mind that are driving their actions of body and speech that are actually causing the harm. So just like a stick doesn't just jump out of the road to hit us, but is wielded by someone, the person who's screaming at us or hurling insults or kicking us or, cheating us in some way is doing it because they're out of control with their attachment and aversion. They think that they are doing what's necessary to protect their precious self, and they're wrong, and they're out of control. So we need to understand that the real enemy are these unskillful, disturbing states of mind, not the actor, not the person. Doesn't mean we don't, protect ourselves from getting hit by the stick. It just means that instead of taking that action and labeling the person as enemy is not constructive. It's what leads us to suffering, more and more suffering. So if we can have compassion for the person out of control, if we can see them like a drunk person, our best friend who had too much to drink on their birthday, who's behaving kind of inappropriately, if we can understand that's actually the condition we're all in as samsaric beings. And it doesn't mean we don't keep them from hurting us. It just means we don't hate them for being out of control. We have compassion. And this helps us with compassion for ourselves, so that when we make mistakes, when we're rude or, hurtful or whatever, we understand that we're doing it under this misunderstanding of where happiness is or where avoiding suffering is. We think avoiding suffering is going to the doctor and getting the shot. But if we didn't harm others in the past, harm their bodies, we wouldn't need a shot, because we wouldn't be vulnerable to the illness. Now, that takes a long time. Keep taking your shots. Okay, Robert, did that help, Brian?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thanks for the question. Robert or Veronica?
Veronica. Hi. Actually, I really, really enjoyed the meditation that we just did. And it hit me in a subject that I have been struggling. I had a problem with in my work, so my friends become not my friends. Right. And I have been struggling with that for a long time. So first, one question: how we should strive to see other people, because this categorization is something that we do automatically, even with ourselves.
That's true. Yes.
So how
this
should
comes from our ignorance.
Go ahead.
Well, so the basis for why we do it automatically is due to our ignorance. We really think that because we perceive of a self, we couldn't see ourselves as a self unless we saw others as other. We didn't think me, we couldn't think you. Okay? from that basis, we then want to, nurture this self, me. Okay? And we think happiness lies there. We think getting what this me wants, avoiding what this me doesn't want, is the source of our, happiness and joy and contentment and peace. So if we see others as getting in the way of what we want or inflicting physical pain or mental pain on us, if we see them as the source, then we're putting our happiness in the hands of external things. And the Buddha said, actually, our experience of suffering and happiness is a result of our past actions. If we want to be happy, we need to do positive actions, not blame others for our unhappiness.
Yes, it has taken me a while, but I think I'm closer to that. But to the point that we characterize people either as strangers, enemies, or friends, how should we strive to see them? Just as another
Another
being?
Ignorant, sentient being who wants happiness, does not want suffering, and doesn't know what they're doing.
Okay.
It's really important to see them as confused. And sometimes they might be right, and we're the ones that are completely off the wall.
Yes.
But it's just mostly just this idea of, for me, it's sort of like coming from a place of trust. And that trust is they want to be happy. They don't want to suffer. And they think getting their way is going to do it, And so I'm apparently in their way. Now, that doesn't mean we just stand back. Please run over me. Because it isn't what we do or not do that makes them happy or suffer. They're also mistaken about what they think is the source of happiness and suffering. So we're very enmeshed in our actions. If only you did this, I'd be happy. If you would do your share of the chores, I'd be happy. If it isn't that someone shouldn't do their share of the chores, but whether we're happy or not comes from our mind, how we handle it, how we respond to it.
Okay.
So it's really about just seeing others. Doesn't mean that if people are, there's someone out there, mugging people, robbing banks, committing fraud, that they shouldn't go to jail. It just means that we don't have to hate them for their misunderstanding about what makes them happy. They have a habit. People who steal in this life have developed that habit. They develop the thinking that taking what they want, even if it's just to convert it into money, is what will make them happy. And they're mistaken about that. And they're going to suffer in the future by not having resources. And they're going to keep doing that habit until they get with the program and figure out that that's, that actually what's ripening. This is what's so big. I mean, this is a big picture. That it isn't what is happening external to us that is the source of our happiness or suffering. It's the results of our past actions. So we have this experience because we've caused harm to someone in a similar way in the past. And we're just trading places. So if we're the recipient of oppression, we probably oppress that same group that was oppressing us in this life, So if we want to end, this cycle, we have to drop the hate of people. We have to understand that sentient beings are trying to be happy and they don't know what they're doing. Just like me, and work on our own minds and our own response. Doesn't mean we don't recognize when actions of speech and body are harmful and we do actions to try to, prevent oppression. It just means we don't see that person who's doing the oppressing as different from ourselves. They may have a different habit manifesting in this life, or if we just don't check our own bias and our own tendency to just categorize, those people, we're going to end up being an oppressor.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? It's getting late. Yeah, Robert.
With that, I guess what we just do is like a guided meditation, right?
Yes, that was a guided meditation.
So I mean, slightly off topic, I guess in a way. But when you are more advanced, maybe like you, do you have that? Because this is very good. I enjoy this. But at some point, is this how it's done at a higher?
Well, this is what comes out of studying. Or listening to the teachings, and then you kind of take notes, and then you spend some time thinking about it, and you reflect on it, and then you come to some conclusions eventually.
So they give
then
you
reflect more on it so that you can internalize it.
But do they have? Say people are doing this for years. You never stop, I guess, right? Do they have?
No.
This is good.
Not until you're enlightened. I don't think enlightened people have to.
No, but do they sit in large rooms because this is good? There's a quiet and you speaking.
No, actually, it's very interesting. Okay. Most of the Buddhist countries, the teachers from they, especially in the Tibetan tradition, they do it on their own. It's all in their heads. You've not heard a noisier place than a monastery, because they are memorizing text. And so they're walking around the roofs of the buildings shouting text to memorize, because they're not allowed to bring books to class. So, and so that's the conditions that the Tibetans are learning under. So it's really pretty hilarious. Now, if they decide their meditation, that they are a suitable vessel to spend their adult years in long meditation, they do go up into the hills and find caves and meditate. Caves being a loose term for like an adobe hut. So yeah, it's just because those are good conditions. You do need suitable surroundings. It is helpful if it's quiet. It is helpful if there's, no one coming in while you're meditating, but at least, if you could, it is helpful to ask permission of your family. Say, okay, for these 15 minutes, unless you're bleeding, don't knock. Now, of course, it has to be age appropriate. If there's a child that you just can't leave alone, then you can't leave them alone. That's the way it is. That's part of the sacrifice of parents, But people do their meditations at lunch hour, at work. They close their door. They go to a bench outside.
I guess what I was thinking, what's that, a vine? You put that white thing and the vine grows up the white thing.
The trestle.
So right now the grass is all over the place. so I guess those guided meditations are helpful to attach, I guess.
Yeah. And so yes, that's why we send you meditations to read and review, but that's why you only do bits of them, because they can be very long. And if you're not familiar with the material, you need some more time to think about between paragraphs, so to speak. Right. So that you can develop, kind of go, I don't know about that. So you want to think about it. So, but then you also do glance meditations where you just read the meditations to become familiar with the logic.
Okay, thank you. This was great. Appreciate it.
So as Rebecca mentioned, you can also, if you pay Nicole, not her personally, if you pay the center, I've forgotten what it is. Nicole? They're not really here.
I think it's 15 or 20. I can't remember. I'll have to check with Nicole.
For what?
To buy the key for
0.
20. Okay. If you give Nicole, the center, $20. That gives you the password to the FPMT online course on how to meditate. And then they have all the audio of Sangi Kadro, who happens to lead the How to Meditate module. So you can listen to her meditations, you know, and that's cheaper than buying it through the, I mean, the FPMT allows us to do this so the centers can, you know, pay their rent. So you can become a member of the FPMT and get that too, but the centers also need your help. So you can pay us less than what you pay them. So, but for every module, you can do that and we'll give you the key and then you'll have the audio files and that can be very helpful. It depends on the person. Some people really, you know, it's just too much information. But I think for most people, having guided meditations in the beginning can help. But the main thing is to read the Dharma and to think about it in these chunks like this, you know, so anyway, anybody else? 2 cents? No cents? $20? Okay, so let's dedicate.
Venerable Tendron,
Yes.
when we dedicate, can we dedicate to my friend Tom Carr who passed away? Thank you.
Say the name again.
His name is Tom Carr and he died yesterday morning.
Yeah. So the purpose of dedicating prayers to someone who has just died is while a person's in the intermediate state, you know, we say that they go from this life into an intermediate state, a Bardo state. And it's said that prayer is done during that time, although it can't change, you know, whatever seed ripened for their rebirth, it can change the conditions, the completing conditions. So if they are going to have a human rebirth, they may have, you know, better conditions as a human, you know, a perfect human rebirth instead of just a human rebirth with lots of difficulties like war, you know. So that's the point of doing prayers and dedicating our efforts to someone who's recently died. And if we know someone, our prayers have more power because of our karmic connection with them. So when our friends ask us to pray for someone that they know, it's all these, you know, little karmic connections that can help. So and tomorrow night, Rebecca, I'm going to do the Mama Kappa Guru Yoga with Venerable Amy. I think Shanti Deva is hosting that. So just so you know.
Oh, thank you.
So now we're going to dedicate. So we want to rejoice in our efforts tonight to try to understand how to meditate and how to work with our minds in this particular way. And so we want to, you know, what we're dedicating is any benefits that any of those positive seeds that we placed on our mind streams, they're going to ripen as positive effects in the future. And so we want to dedicate those effects to benefit others. And in particular, anyone, you know, that we're concerned with, our loved ones, you know, all those people suffering from coronavirus, you know, and then anyone who has recently passed away. And we think that we may our merit not exhaust until samsara is empty of suffering sentient beings. So we'll read these dedication verses. Oops, that's not it. Oops. Okay. So really feel positive about your efforts. And those are our merits. Because of all the merits of the 3 times created by me and all the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and other sentient beings, may there be no wars, famines, disease, quarreling, fighting, or unhappy minds. May there be great prosperity, and may everything needed be easily obtained. May all the human beings in the world be guided by spiritual leaders teaching only Dharma, and may everyone enjoy the happiness of Dharma. May everyone have perfect conditions and have only compassion and love for each other in their mind streams, and may they only benefit and never harm each other. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. So thank you very much.